Hey guys, welcome to another episode of For the Love of Bodybuilding. I'm your host, Logan Schultz with Center Stage Aesthetics,
And I'm Ian Powell with Ian Powell Aesthetics.
and it looks like today we are going to be talking about some misconceptions in bodybuilding. I think we're going to get started with steroids are a shortcut. What are your thoughts on this, Ian?
Uh, yeah, this is kind of one of the things, and you see this a lot with I think you see like memes and stuff, and it'll be like some fat dude would be like, "Oh yeah, if I took steroids, I could be that big," you know. But in all reality, it's far from a shortcut. There is a level amount of work that needs to go in that you can have somebody who just decides, hey, I'm just gonna start a cycle and take a gram of testosterone to start off, and I'll go pro by the end of the year. Then they'll realize very quickly, if they don't have all the other pillars lined up like nutrition and training, and they're just taking a bunch of stuff and they're going in there and just kind of winging it, that they're not going to necessarily build the physique, and it's going to take
Yeah.
them a lot longer than they think.
Well, I think that the often the argument, right, is that, and I see this come from a lot of like the science people, is steroids absolutely do build muscle, right? And if you don't have those foundations, steroids are still going to build muscle just with the addition of them being in. We get that. That is true. You are going to have more muscle mass because you added them. However, we are referring to bodybuilding in particular. And the reality is that, yeah, you can add them in, but you're not going to look like a bodybuilder just because you did add them in, right? You still need to train really hard, and you still need to have diet and everything else on point. Diet, sleep, stress management, like the whole nine needs to be on point if you want to be a good bodybuilder, right? If you want to be competitive. So in that aspect, right? Like no, they're not a shortcut, right? Like
Right? Yeah,
will they help,
absolutely.
will they help you put on muscle tissue? Absolutely, 100%. We're not denying that. We're just saying that they're not this magic pill end all be all that's going to um, make you successful and give you the physique that you think that you could have
Yeah,
with just the steroids, right?
yeah. I think that's a good point, because I think the studies you're referring to are the ones where it's like, yeah, this guy took 400, 300 milligrams of testosterone. He didn't work out for 10 weeks. And then group A didn't take any testosterone and worked out for 5 days a week. And group B, or whatever, that was taking steroids and wasn't, working out, made built more muscle.
Yep.
And that's true. You will build muscle quicker, faster, for sure. But in the regards of competitive bodybuilding, there's levels to it. You have your regional level, you have your state level, you have the national level, and then you have the pro level. Steroids, in any sense, is not going to take you from the regional level to the pro level in just a year, or unless you're just some sort of genetic freak, which you would already know. Basically, if you have that, you would just be one of those guys that just works out and doesn't really have to work out very hard, and they just put on tissue. We all know these assholes in the gym that don't
The
train very
reality
hard,
is,
and they just grow like crazy.
yeah, I mean, the reality is that if you were that genetic freak, right, like you would be. Let's take. I think Keon is probably one of the best examples, and he's the easiest example, right? Keon had a very fast rise in bodybuilding, right? Like, I think he just admitted that he hardly ever trained hamstrings, and he was turning pro and on the Olympia stage, and he really didn't even start to train them hard until a couple of years ago. And we know that Keon was competing at the Olympia without using PEDs. And so when you talk about those genetic outliers, like they're obvious, right? Like they build muscle a lot easier than everybody else around them. And then when they add those things in, it takes them to another level. Absolutely. But then you have to then there's another level of the execution and the mindset that's going to get you to that Olympia level. So the reality is that um, average Joe Blow, no, you won't look like this if you just take steroids. So get off your high horse.
Yep, get off your high horse and start working, because yeah, there's just so many levels to it. I mean, I don't necessarily like to refer to them as steroids are a shortcut, because steroids will make you, will develop your body a lot quicker than if you were to take naturally.
Absolutely. They
Yeah,
absolutely work.
yeah, absolutely. I did my first show naturally when I was 26 years old, and um, got shredded. But the reality is, if I ever wanted to like be a pro, there's no way I would be able to do it naturally. I would be able to build a really good physique, and probably a pretty decently competitive one by the time I'm 35 or 36, 37, whenever I kind of built more maturity.
Mhm.
But that's definitely a lot of time left on the table in that sense of things. So it's not a shortcut, but if you know what you're doing and if you have aspirations to go to high levels, I mean, that's another conversation alone, to be people that are touching these things and they
Yeah.
have maybe no aspirations, or maybe they're just doing it because their homie got hopped on something, and then they're beating them in the gym and they want to hop on something, and then that's an entirely different story.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I get it, right? Like, I'm I will never tell somebody that they can't use steroids because I was that guy using steroids before I had everything else nailed down. I will say, though, that through experience, I think that you need to have a baseline of understanding of what the risks are. And you really need to know like what you're doing to yourself and understand that more than likely you're not just going to do one. Like they're going to make you feel like Superman and you're going to feel like a monster in the gym.
You're
Your
not going to want to come off.
your confidence is like it's going to be through the roof. Your sex drive, right? Like your performance, right? Like um there are going to be things that make it almost addicting in a sense, right? Um
For sure.
you don't become physically or mentally addicted to it, right? But like
Mhm.
you don't just want to run one. So I think that like if you have that understanding, then go for it, right? But at the end of the day, you're a grown adult and you can make your own choices. And if you want to do it, then do it. But
Mhm.
don't start bashing bodybuilding. Don't start bashing the compound itself because you were ignorant in your use.
Yeah, because we do know a lot of people, or people in the past that have, taken these drugs and they have wrecked. They have didn't expect these things and didn't know how to properly handle these compounds, and next thing you know, their life is in a disarray. And they blame bodybuilding, or they blame the drug itself, and it's
Yeah.
just like, well, no, you're the one doing it. Nobody makes you do any of this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody makes you do any of that. But I have a question for you. Um, since you said you started out a lot earlier taking stuff and kind of figuring things out, how much more would you think you would have gained out of maybe your first or second cycle if you had just nutrition and training laid down to more of a baseline level? Would you have been further along, or do you think, obviously everything happens for a reason, but how much further along do you think you would be?
I would have absolutely have been further along. The reality is that, well, it's a couple of things, right? Twofold. I do not think that I had quality gear my first cycle. The reason that I don't think I had quality gear is because I used D-ball and I was shredded. Like I was eating like Taco Bell and Jack in the Box and just terrible food, and I was the most peeled I'd ever been in my life. And I've always been a lean guy. And I was on testosterone and D-ball. That didn't make any sense,
I
right?
think it was probably like Winstrol or something. You were taking Winstrol or something instead.
I
I don't
don't
even
know
know.
what it was. To be honest, I really don't know. And I don't have any speculation because I do think that my testosterone was at least good, decently good, anyways. I mean, it broke me out really, really bad, but we've talked about that before. That could have been a fluctuation in hormones. I've also found that certain gear, and I don't know if it's like the carrier oil or what it is, but there are certain like brands that I'll get from certain labs that I can't take because they break me out worse than all the others.
Mhm.
Um, so this one did that really, really bad. And I know that it did that. So it made me think that it wasn't like the greatest of stuff. Like I got stronger, absolutely. But I was really shredded. So there is that aspect. Secondly, had my nutrition have been on point and had I have had a, don't get me wrong, I trained my ass off. So like I didn't have the mind to muscle connection that I have today. And so, um, it was a lot more like volume and like just running myself into the ground. Like I would squat, um, hack squat, leg press, and do walking lunges with a barbell on my back all in one session, um, and just absolutely destroy myself. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Had so training is kind of like a maybe, but nutrition absolutely 100%.
Well, yeah,
There's no
nutrition
argument.
is
There's no
nutrition.
argument.
Mm-hmm.
Had
Because you were just
nutrition.
eating everything, right? You were just fucking trying to eat whatever was in front of you, and just like didn't really matter. There was no macro. It's probably not even macro counting. It was eating,
A hundred
just eating.
percent, and it was just
Mhm.
garbage. Like, and
Yeah.
so I think had nutrition been on point, yeah, for sure. Um, I wish, looking back now, I wouldn't have changed anything to be honest. Though, like, I have a lot of
Oh yeah.
experiences,
Yeah.
and I think that experience is valuable. And I have a lot of people come to me asking me questions about stuff, and I can rattle off not just scientific stuff, but I can also rattle off my personal experiences. And I've had the gambit of good drugs and bad drugs. Um, so
So I mean, I don't know if we necessarily have differing opinions on this, but it would be good to talk about. So we could do like a few different examples of saying, would you recommend someone doing their very first show? Maybe they say they're like 24 or 25. They love bodybuilding, but they've never done it before. But then this person, obviously it comes down to a person, but maybe this person wanted to run a cycle. What would you kind of do, and how would you kind of approach this for this person?
so you're saying that I'm prepping a client. They've never run
Yes.
a cycle, but they want to.
Hmm. They want to do
Um,
a show. They
they
don't want
want
to
to
do
do
a cycle. They want to do a show.
they want to do a show. Okay. Are they coming to me saying they want to do a cycle or no?
That they are willing to.
That they're willing to.
Mhm.
Okay. I simply present an option, and it's one of two things, right? Um, you can go through this show naturally. We can do everything we can to support you hormonally through natural pathways, and you can see what you're made of. And I think that that's good. If you can do this naturally, you can absolutely do this enhanced, right? And I know that that's what you did, and I absolutely respect it. I also think that there's a second pathway that is potentially a little bit more healthy, in that you would just do not necessarily a cycle, but we just do enough testosterone for hormone replacement therapy. And then maybe we can add in some thyroid meds to just ensure that we have enough thyroid production throughout, right? So I'm not talking about a cycle. I'm just talking about keeping those numbers at normal levels. Um, I would suggest that we start there and we don't jump straight to 300 milligrams of testosterone or something like that, right?
Right.
I think that that's a better option than jumping into a cycle. That's my opinion.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree with that for sure. Obviously, kind of where I came from, and that's why I tell people I was like, if you really want to compete and do a show, and you're literally natural, like you haven't even touched pro
Mhm.
hormones, or you haven't done a cycle previously in your 20s, or whatever it may be, like you're just truly, truly natural. Um, See the prep through and see if how much you can take, and see if you're up to the challenge of it, because it's going to take a lot longer as natural. It's going to be harder in a sense of you need to manage your recovery that you're not going to have if you have these other enhanced factors.
Mhm.
And it's going to kind of let you know, like, hey, like if you able to do a prep, get in decent shape, not even shredded, but if you're able to get in decent shape and you go on stage and you like it and you love it, I fucking guarantee you that like you will absolutely just be totally over the moon. And I think from that point, rebounding off of like that show phase and maybe then running, and the person's like, yeah, I'm ready. I want to do this. This is awesome.
Yeah.
I had a great experience. Then we could talk about running, someone's first cycle in that recovery phase once they've kind of come out of that post-show blues and recovery, and then go
Yeah.
from there. That's kind of how I would do it, just because I feel like a lot of people um, hop on too many things for their first show for the very first time, and then they have no idea what's happening to their body. They
100%.
are dieting, they are hungry as hell. They have also have these drugs that are influencing their mind in some situations,
Hmm.
and just influencing just their temperament and their mood. And
Yep.
so the people that are around them aren't necessarily understanding, well, what the, like, you're hungry all the time now, and sometimes you become crazy. People get crazy on when they diet down, and if you've never done it before,
Hmm.
you have no idea what's going to happen if you start taking one, two, three, multiple compounds.
Yeah.
And sure enough, once you do a show, you don't even know how you'll kind of bounce back from that. You don't know how your body's going to rebound as far as maybe binge eating or just eating off plan a bunch of times, and then excessive weight gain, hormonal fluctuations. It can wreck yourself. So I definitely am the camp of doing it natural first. But I do like the idea of what you're talking about, of just doing like a hormone replacement level, maybe a little bit of like T3 T4 or something in there to just make sure
Mhm.
you have enough turnover on metabolism. I definitely think that's an appropriate response, and not so much to necessarily kind of shut somebody down in the sense if they are a unnatural kind of person.
Yeah.
So I do agree with that approach. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, yeah, I absolutely agree that, like, if you're doing your first cycle during a prep, I think that is a very, um,
You're missing out on a lot of games.
it's not only that, but I think that also you you don't know what is a byproduct of the prep and what's a byproduct of the gear. And
Yeah, too
this
many
is why,
variables.
yeah, because steroids, it, I always tell people steroids enhance your personality. Okay, so if you're an aggressive asshole already as it is, it's going to make that worse. If you're hypersexual, it's going to make that worse. If you are, right, like it just kind of enhances who you are. If you're, not
Yep.
really an aggressive person, like it might make you slightly more aggressive. But I can tell you being hungry will make you more aggressive. It will
hmm
make you shorter, right? And so what could end up happening is that now you get um, a misrepresentation of what steroids do to you when in actuality it's just the low calories and high cardio. You're just exhausted, right?
Your fatigue, yeah, is just very
Yeah.
high.
So you don't have an understanding of what's really happening. That's why if it's a first cycle, I don't really want to do it during a prep.
No.
No.
Yeah.
I would just go baseline, like let's go baseline hormone replacement, because that should not have any effect on who you are as a person, because we're going to monitor what those baselines are with blood work before prep starts and then throughout prep, right? And
Yep.
we're only going to base changes on, testing those markers. So,
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a very valid point, because there is also the argument that, competing and dieting down naturally is arguably very risky and very dangerous in itself. You go down to really low levels, your thyroid is,
mhm.
not functioning super properly. It's, your hormones are crashed. I think I got my bloods tested after my first show naturally. I think my overall testosterone was like 130 or something like that.
Mhm.
I don't even remember my thyroid was. At that point, I didn't even know if I was feeling fine or not. I was like, oh, this is just normal for me. It just kind of feels normal, but in a sense, can be a little bit risky if you're not used to it. But I think it's definitely important, just because the hunger and prep, people think they can just do like 12, 14-week preps. No, you're going to need twice that at minimum for your first time, and you're going to have to get used to being hungry. And if you cannot get used to being hungry, and then you throw on, anabolics on top of it, you are just going to be a mess. Yeah,
Oh,
you're that can be a mess.
yeah, I'll tell you a story, and Ian, I don't think we're going to get to the other misconception we talked about, and that's completely fine.
We talked
But
about this though. We talked about how we
yeah,
can we
okay.
can ramble
So,
on.
so my first prep was a 12-week prep, right? Because when I first started prepping, like from my understanding, you really didn't do anything much longer than 12 weeks. Okay. Now, maybe that was vastly wrong. That was just the understanding that I had. So I had never dieted. I had never really experienced hunger before. So that first prep was miserable, bro. Like,
Hmm.
I, and I didn't get, I mean, honestly, I didn't get near lean enough. And I was running, I'll be frank, right? Like, I was running 100 milligrams of Test Prop, 100 milligrams Masteron, 100 milligrams of Tren Ace every other day. Okay. Um, I was probably on some Winnie or Proviron too. I don't remember. That was a long time ago. But I do know that I was on that dosages, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I remember literally like I had gotten really into like making my wife. Um, we were just dating at the time, but like brownies in a cup, and I
Okay.
would like lick my fingers, you know.
Hmm.
Or I would like when I was there was one time where I was really really hungry. I like sat in a hot bath and I was sucking on Tic Tacs, and I ended up eating like the whole bottle of Tic Tacs. And
Casual.
it was like a thing of like 240 Tic Tacs.
Jesus.
Yeah, like I added a bunch of calories in, like
Yeah, you didn't even know.
One Tic Tac is like 5 calories. It's like
Yeah.
it's
Just eat.
I don't actually remember the number on it, but it was like it was a really low number. So I mean, had I have been reasonable with it, and one or two Tic Tacs a day, a couple pieces of gum, stuff like that, it would have been perfectly fine.
Mhm.
But I just remember being miserably hungry. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
I think.
thinking,
Go ahead.
oh, and thinking that I wasn't cheating on my diet. Like, that's the
Mhm.
kicker, right?
Well,
Like,
people will do that for sure and be like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm not cheating my diet. It's just like it's. I only had like well, I had like 2 packs of gum this week, 3 packs of gum. It's just
yeah,
like or like
come
only
on.
had like 20 stevias today. There's all sorts of these things, but I definitely remember that whenever you have that first prep and you have to manage that hunger that first time, um, it's definitely something that like it's like quite a different experience. Obviously, you said your first prep was 12 weeks,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, mine was 25 weeks. 25 weeks was my first prep. But again, all natural, so I needed to take my time. And I didn't when I say 25 weeks, I wasn't really like fat when I was 184. I think I started that prep. I was 184. I wasn't fat. I was just kind of like normal. He fed me up a good amount to make sure I was filled out properly before he deleted my body into existence during that prep. Um, but yeah, it was one of those things that you just realize it's like you have to be able to understand how you manage hunger, how you deal with that, how you deal with like people around you. And if you just start adding, drugs on top of that, like for you, I'm sure it was a lot worse because you were adding anabolics and,
yeah.
especially Trent, it was just probably like you were probably just like just ravenous on top of that 12 weeks. And I'm sure your cut was a bit harsher because you only did 12 weeks. So you cut calories a lot
100%.
more
Yep.
with probably no refeeds or anything, right?
No.
Yeah, so you didn't even refeed. Like, yeah, it's just straight dying just through the
No,
whole thing.
refeeds weren't really like,
Yeah, you're just like, why would I eat more calories when I'm trying to like
yeah, yeah,
lose weight? You're like, that doesn't make any
yeah.
sense.
Uh, so I want to clarify something. When you say 25 weeks of prep, does that mean 25 strict weeks of prep?
Yeah, I didn't miss a meal. I didn't miss a cardio.
Yeah, but like
All that was dieting.
in the beginning, like, did you still have a free meal, or it's like that was 100% dieting the entire time?
So that diet. So I started that prep probably mid February of 2021, and I did not get my first free meal until I graduated from college in May 14th or
Okay,
15th. So yeah, that was my first free meal.
so
Everything
you
else,
went
like I did.
like what is that? 12,
Mm,
12 to 16 weeks.
yeah,
Had a
something like
free
that.
meal.
It was sushi. It was like graduation
That was
sushi, and
your only
then
one.
that was it. Yeah, that was
Dang,
it. And then like he would have like refeeds towards like the end, and on
sure.
those refeeds, I had like my last sushi meal. After that, I probably had another one at like 10 weeks out, and one more at like 6 or 7,
Okay.
and then the rest it was just dieting straight through. But he never necessarily refeed me very much either.
Yeah.
In that sense, just more or less managing hunger and fatigue at that point.
That's interesting because I always have like a hard time like saying like when prep started. And like let's take this year for example, right? I started prep for North Americans at 20 weeks out. Okay. Then we had the whole went to the hospital, the whole heart testing and everything like that, right? And so I wasn't going to get those results back until we were like 15 or 14 weeks out. So during that time frame, no drugs, right? But we're dieting. Okay. No free meals, right? We've pulled calories, adding in cardio. We're coming down and it's coming down easily, right? And then we decided to push the show. Let's move it to nationals instead. It just makes more sense to do, right? It gives
What
us
was it?
much
What
more
was the first show that you were aiming for everybody for
North
referencing?
Americans. North
And that
Americans.
was what date was that compared to what nationals is?
August. I think it was end of August.
Mhm.
Yeah, like August 28th, I think.
So like an additional like 4 months, 5 months
Yeah.
before
Yeah,
nationals
yeah, yeah.
for
So
people listening.
so I want to say somewhere in the ballpark of 16 weeks out is when we decided to go ahead and just push it to nationals. Maybe 15 weeks out, something like that.
Hmm.
Um, and then so we added back in free meals, just one free meal a week, but we continued pulling calories and adding cardio, right? So my free meal, I wasn't going crazy. I was just having a meal, whatever meal I wanted, and then going about it, right? Um,
Anything like you could have pizza or whatever.
yeah, but I mean, okay, no,
So you gotta clarify.
I wasn't. I wasn't willing to do that personally because I wanted it to keep
Quality.
within track, and I also wanted it to have a date night with my wife. So she's not really a big pizza person or a burger person. So we have a restaurant that we really like, and so it was mostly like restaurant food. Okay,
Yeah.
like now I would get like a chicken fried steak and mashed potatoes, um,
It's still
or a
better, more
burger.
quality than a pizza, though, for sure.
Yeah, or a burger or something like that at the restaurant, right? So
Yeah.
we're still talking like good quality foods, but they were definitely fattier. They were definitely carbier, right? Um, I don't remember if I had dessert or not, to be honest. That was a little while ago. But and I had whatever appetizer. And then once we got to like 20 weeks out, um, we stopped the free meals, obviously turned it up a notch. And then we didn't add drugs until like 17 weeks out because my body had been responding so well. So it's like, when did I start prep?
Yeah, that one's hard to tell because you were aiming for a show and then weren't
Yeah,
necessarily going to make it in the sense for health and whatever reason, then pushed it back to another one. So in that sense, right, it's much harder to declare where the lines are blurring and
yeah.
where exactly that prep started. But and how many total weeks of dieting have you done? Like, is there even a way to calculate that for you?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, that's what
I
I'm
guess
saying.
I mean technically if you want to start at 20 weeks out from North Americans, right? But I mean to me, like I still had a free meal a week, which was normal. Like that's what I would normally do.
I think
My
that's just
food
more casually dieting down is allowing yourself to have more of these free meals. Like you're just
exactly,
letting
right?
your
So
body come down,
it's like not really like a focused prep for me. Like that's not
not
really
like
a
super strict. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. And like I was still like when I'm in prep, right? To be whatever my coach is telling me to eat, I eat. Okay. But in the off season, it's like he gives me what I'm supposed to eat. And if I want to substitute in like potatoes for rice or cereal for cream of rice or something like that, right? That's similar in macros.
yeah, more
Um,
macro matching,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's more of macro matching, like on a meal to meal basis, right?
which for yeah for sure. I mean that's another conversation. I think that's definitely an appropriate way to do that.
Yeah. Then I would do that, right?
Yeah.
And then once prep starts, I kind of like cut that out for the most part.
Hmm.
Um, as long as we're like in the beginning, though, as long as I was making progress, like I was still having cocoa pebbles instead of cream of rice because my food was still fairly high and I was still fairly full and I just didn't want cream of
Yeah,
rice.
you weren't that hungry. Yeah.
Yeah, but once we got to like, 10 weeks out, 12 weeks out, something like that, like I swapped it over and
Mm,
um then ever since then it's been the exact foods that are written on plan,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it was approached.
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered a good, really good bit there. I mean, I think in short term of all this is just steroids are not a shortcut. They will build muscle, but
Yep.
they are far from a shortcut. So I don't think if you were going to hop on, even if it is a storm cycle or a freaking anabolic PED steroid cycle, you will not become pro or hit all these goals that you think in a blink of an eye. It will still take another half a decade at least of you putting in work,
Yep. At the end of the
and
day,
still then.
it's not going to change your life. In some drastic measure, it's not going to change your physique in some absolutely insane manner. Uh, you still got to put in the work. So,
You got to put in the work, fools. So keep at it.
yeah. All right. Later.
All right, later, guys.